All right, so now that I'm a little bit better at making videos since that perpetual plaque video that I said I was gonna make, um, it was 83 minutes long. So after I was all done, even my wife was like, yeah, they're not gonna wanna watch 83 minutes of you working on this. So it's probably kind of a blessing in disguise that I deleted it by accident because me and technology aren't really the best. So anyway, here's a new video, hopefully much shorter this time, on making beard combs. Yep, that's right, beard combs. Right off the bat, the first thing you're gonna need is, I'm choosing to use 1/4-inch wood, all right? If you don't have a surface planer, or a joiner or all those other tools to make the wood this thin, you can actually buy wood this thin. So to start, the dimensions I'm going to start with are 1/4-inch thick, 3 1/4 wide by 3 1/2 inches tall. Once I cut it down to size, I didn't even realize I had a piece here ready to go. Then I'm ready to make the first series of cuts, which is going to be for the teeth of the comb, which is all going to be done on my table saw. So if you take a peek, I have a setup here with a boat. You guys are familiar with the boat. It's got a jig on here with a couple of different things we got going on. In order to make these cuts symmetrical, this is kind of like a test cut, but this is what they're gonna look like, right? Those are all 1/8 of an inch wide cuts because that's how wide the table saw blade is. And each cut is 1/8 of an inch apart from itself. So each tooth is 1/8 of an inch wide. How do I get them so symmetrically perfect? I have this little gauge here, all right? And it's gonna be, you'll see how it works as it goes along, but once you make your first initial cut, all right, you place this over this 1/8 inch little stick, make your second cut. Your second cut goes on top of the stick, you make your third cut, and you just go right down the line, and it makes it perfect every time. So I have added on to this jig a little stick off the end here, and that allows me to place this on the boat, slide it over till it hits that little stop, and the distance between this little stick right here and the blade is exactly 1/8 inch. And I take my clamp and I clamp it on. Now, the other problem is you need to be able to start your cut at a desired width away from the end so that the end finger is a little bit bigger and a little bit stronger, just for overall handling. So I want that to be 1/4 of an inch. That 1/4-inch cut can either be done by measuring it out first before you set this jig up, making the cut, then setting the jig up, or you can have a separate jig that goes on top of the first jig, and it has a little stop on it. So what that does is you can see there's 2 holes here, all right? The very first hole, might be easier to see if I go this way. The very first hole goes over the finger of the jig and it locks it in place. This stopper right here is 1/4 inch away from the blade. So when I make this first cut, line it up to the stop, make the first cut, take this away, and then every cut after that is going to be 1/8 inch apart. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to start, I have this guy here, I'm actually making a prototype for somebody that has their logo. I already had my friend Liesel laser engrave this logo onto the comb. So I'm ready to start. So here we go. One more thing I forgot to mention. How deep are these fingers? I have the blade set at 1 inch and 1/8. So that's how deep they are, 1 inch and 1/8. cut. Take that away. Okay, so there's the first step. If it works out like it's supposed to, I think I'm still kind of refining my measurements a little bit, because you can see that the first edge here and the second edge, this one is a little bit thicker. So I'm just going to cut that down to size a little bit so that they both match. I marked this out. I'm going to go ahead and use my boat to cut this down to size. All right, so that's a little more even. Next step, we're going to go over to the bandsaw and cut out this profile. Okay, so I'm going to cut this out on the bandsaw. It's going to be really hard for you guys to see the lines when I'm cutting, but just pay attention to where I'm keeping my fingers. I have a tight curve right here, so I've swapped my blade out with an 1/8 inch blade. So really thin blade, that's going to allow me to make that nice tight curve. If you don't have a bandsaw or a table saw, you can definitely use a coping saw by hand, and you can use that to cut out your fingers, cut out the overall profile. So there's your hand tool alternative to a bandsaw. Here we go. And that's that. Next, I'm going to use the spindle sander to clean up this outside edge here from the bandsaw. If you don't have a spindle sander, well, you can just sand it all by hand. Takes a lot longer, but at least you can do it by hand. I turn on my dust collector. Of course, if you have a spindle sander, that makes that process pretty darn quick. All right, so as you can see on the comb, the fingers are slightly angled. Right now, they're still very blocky and straight. So I'm going to use my 1-inch belt sander to start to angle them down. There is a way to do this by hand, which you still need to do regardless of machines. So I'll show you how to do it in a little bit on how to angle those by hand. So you can see those are starting to get a little bit thinner. Okay, so now that we've made the teeth slightly thinner, the thickness, as you can see, angles down as well. Right now, mine is still very blocky. So I'm going to use this belt sander to go ahead and take away the thickness. Again, you can do this by hand. You can even buy little round drums that go onto a drill or a drill press. If you don't have a spindle sander or a belt sander, they're pretty cheap, and you could use it that way to expedite your sanding. So I'm gonna go ahead and make this a little thinner. I'm gonna do both sides. So that's looking pretty good. So I'm also going to use this belt sander to put a small detail. As you can see on the outside here, it's slightly curved. So again, mine are still very blocky, so I'm going to use the belt sander to put a slight detail on there. I'm gonna go back to my spindle sander, and I'm just gonna clean up the detail that I just put on there and make this a little round on the top here. Rounding off that edge gives it kind of a nice, again, nice little detail. All right, so here is the technique that I was referring to about making the fingers on the comb a little thinner. This is how you're going to do it by hand. Mount it up in a vise, and you're going to use. I have 120 grit sandpaper that I'm using here, and I just cut a strip that's about 1 inch wide. Nice long strip though. And you're just going to basically sand away here. The ability to be able to use the power sanders like I did just makes this go a lot quicker. You still need to do it anyway, because although they are thinner along their width and thinner along their thickness, they still have square-like edges on them. So I'm going to round them off. So you just... I'll come in and we'll concentrate on, I was concentrating on this side, now I'm going to concentrate on this side. Again, only really from this direction though. Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to go in the opposite direction. So. All right, so that was basically sanded in on all 4 corners. As you can see, they're definitely starting to get nice and pointy. Not sharp like a pencil. I've made them sharp like a pencil before, and when you go to use it, you end up just stabbing yourself. So so you kind of want to have them like, you know, pointy, but still a slight flat on there. Another thing you can do too is you can go over the top. If you do make them pointy, you can go over the top with a bigger piece of sandpaper actually, and carefully, because these are going to get they're starting to get kind of wobbly, they're getting thin. Carefully work your way up and over, all right, making it kind of round. All right, so blow off any dust, and then you can test it out to see if the fingers, yeah, that's getting in there. Yeah, I can definitely feel it getting in there. So yeah, I think that's starting to look pretty good. At this point now, you can go around and you're gonna do this by hand as well, and you're gonna sand out all of the edges, all of this stuff. Right now, everything's still 90 degrees and still has a sharp edge to it. So I'm gonna go around by hand and basically take away all the sharp edges. You can put it back in the vise. That'll help you hold everything. And when you get down here, just be careful you're not putting a ton of pressure on it. You don't want to break it. Pretty much all done sanding here. One little detail that I'm going to add. I'm going to take the sandpaper, fold it up, I'm gonna get inside, and the top edges on both sides, I'm gonna come in and just take that 90-degree edge away. It kind of helps with pulling any hair. Having every edge smooth will definitely make it more comfortable for you. So it's hard to tell, but down inside here is no longer a 90-degree edge. This other side still is. I still have to do that, but this side will definitely allow everything to kind of, your hair to flow in and out as smooth as possible. I'm going to use my air compressor to clean this off. Does a really good job at getting all the dust out before you apply some finish onto this. If you don't have an air compressor, you can just wipe it off with a rag, a clean rag, the best that you can. Air really does a really good job of getting all the dust out. You can actually buy little cans of compressed air, especially for really small jobs like this. It might go really, really quickly and last you a decent amount of time for such a small project. All right, so for the finish, I'm just going to use mineral oil. Mineral oil you can buy at, well, CVS, as you can see right here, found in the laxative aisle. It's what you can use it on cutting boards. It's all natural. It's okay to obviously ingest it, since you can use it as a as you can use it as a laxative. It's odorless, tasteless, colorless, but what it does is it really helps because it's an oil. It helps really bring out the grain and keeps the wood from drying out too much. So I just put one coat on. Now there's a couple of different ways you can do this. One way is to actually take the oil and pour it into a small Tupperware container where you would completely submerge this. It would really soak in, which is probably the most effective way as far as getting the oil completely soaked in to the wood. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to apply it on a rag and wipe it on. So that's how I'm going to do that. Take the rag, put it over the top. I'm just going to get a little bit of oil on there, as you can see, and I just have to wipe it on. And you can see the difference in the color right off the bat with the walnut that I'm using here. It's going to make the wood darker. Okay, so it's completely oiled up. I put on a pretty generous coat. So I'm going to take a dry rag and wipe it down so it's not super oily to the touch. Now, there's one little last spot that's really hard to get, and that is in between the fingers. So the best way that I have figured out to do this is to basically just take a screwdriver, flat-bladed screwdriver, and take your oily rag, throw it over the screwdriver, use the screwdriver to go in between, and that basically works pretty well. Can't really go back and forth because the end of the fingers will catch on the rag, so I'm just going to go in one direction. Start from the bottom and work your way up, and that seemed to be enough. So that's pretty much it. One little final wipe down. And you got yourself a fancy little beard comb. So there's your beard comb. This is just the handle style I just made arbitrarily. There's a million different ways that you can design these. Just straight across. You can have a handle coming off the side. You can make like more of a pick style where the handle comes straight up. It's whatever you want. That's the cool thing about this. There's no really right or wrong way. And this is just one style of fingers as well that are 1/8 inch apart. They actually get greater than an 1/8 inch as you sand and sharpen them a little bit. So not really the finest comb, but it actually works particularly well for coarse hairs, like you see on my beard. Beard hairs are generally a little bit coarser than hair on top of your head. So, but hope you liked the video.